She left a note, but it wasn't her handwriting. On the morning of November 14, 2019, the town of Hawick, Massachusetts, woke to an ordinary Thursday. The weather forecast predicted overcast skies with light rain by evening, a typical late autumn day in this coastal community of just under 4,000 residents. Main Street had already begun its quiet rhythm when, at 7:42 a.m., a 911 call came from 41 Birch Lane. The caller was David Calloway, 43, a plumber who had arrived at the residence to fix a leaking pipe. He had been let in by the homeowner, Margaret Ellis, 61, a retired schoolteacher who lived alone in the two-bedroom colonial she had shared with her late husband, Thomas, who died in 2015. David told dispatchers he found Margaret in the upstairs bedroom. She was unconscious. There was a bottle of pills on the nightstand, and there was a note on the pillow beside her. What happened next would consume investigators for years and leave a community searching for answers that still remain elusive. Margaret Ellis was born in Hawick in 1958, the middle child of a firefighter and a church secretary. She graduated from Hawick High School in 1976 and went on to earn a teaching degree from Boston State College. For 31 years, she taught 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary, where she was known for her patience, her hand-knitted scarves, and her annual tradition of taking students to visit the town cemetery to learn about local history. Colleagues described her as private but kind, a woman who kept her personal life close and who never quite recovered from the death of her husband, Thomas, a beloved history teacher at the same school, who suffered a fatal heart attack during a school assembly in 2015. After Thomas died, Margaret continued living alone in the house they had purchased in 1987. She tended her garden in summer, attended church on Sundays, and maintained a small circle of close friends she met weekly for coffee at Rosie's Diner on Main Street. She had no children. Her closest relative was a nephew, Brian Ellis, 34, who lived in Worcester and visited her holidays. The 911 call came on a Thursday morning. David Calloway told investigators he had arrived at 7:30 a.m. for an appointment Margaret had scheduled the previous week. He rang the doorbell and waited. After several minutes, he noticed the front door was unlocked, a common practice in Hawick, a town where many residents never lock their doors. He entered and called out. No answer. He noticed a cup of tea on the kitchen table, still warm. He checked the ground floor rooms and found nothing unusual. It was only when he climbed the stairs to the second floor that he found her. Margaret Ellis lay on top of the bed covers, fully dressed in a navy blue cardigan and gray slacks, her reading glasses still perched on her nose. She was unconscious and barely breathing. The pill bottle on the nightstand was a prescription for amitriptyline, an antidepressant she had been taking for years following her husband's death. The label showed a valid prescription from her physician, Dr. Howard Vance. The bottle contained 14 pills, but David noticed that several pills were scattered on the carpet beside the bed. But it was the note that would change everything. It was a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a spiral notebook, the kind sold at any office supply store. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and printed in capital letters. It read, "I cannot go on like this anymore. The pain is too much. Please forgive me. Margaret." David Calloway immediately called 911. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and transported Margaret Ellis to Cape Cod Hospital, where she was admitted to the intensive care unit. She remained in a coma for 4 days. On November 18th, Margaret Ellis died. The cause of death was determined to be an overdose of amitriptyline combined with alcohol. The death was ruled accidental, the result of an intentional overdose. Also, it should have ended. Detective Sarah O'Brien of the Massachusetts State Police had been assigned to investigate the circumstances surrounding Margaret's death after hospital staff flagged the case. It was standard procedure. Any unexpected death or potential suicide required a review. But almost immediately, something didn't add up. The first issue was the note. Detective O'Brien, who had 17 years of experience in forensic document analysis, examined the handwriting and noticed something that made her pause. She pulled Margaret's handwriting from her pension records, her teaching files, and personal correspondence held by her friends. The handwriting on the note was nothing like Margaret Ellis's familiar script. Margaret wrote in a flowing cursive, with distinctive letter formations, her lowercase e tilted distinctly right, her T bars unusually long. The note was printed in block capitals with none of these characteristics. When confronted with this discrepancy, Margaret's friends and family were baffled. Her nephew, Brian Ellis, told detectives his aunt had never mentioned feeling suicidal. Her pastor, Reverend Michael Dunn, said she had seemed tired at their last meeting but had spoken of planning a trip to see her sister in Vermont next spring. Dr. Howard Vance, her physician, confirmed Margaret had been treated for depression but had shown no signs of acute crisis. Her prescription had not been increased. There had been no recent stressful events, but there was something else. When detectives searched Margaret's home, they found a second note. It was hidden in the pages of a cookbook on the kitchen shelf, her husband's favorite recipe book, a wan paperback titled The New England Kitchen. This note was written in the same neat block capitals. It read, "She took the pills. It looks like an accident, but it's not. You will find the truth if you look." The second note was never given to the family. It was not mentioned in the initial police report. It surfaced only when Detective O'Brien requested a deeper investigation 2 months after Margaret's death. The investigation then took on new dimensions. Detectives learned that Margaret had recently changed her will. The new document, executed in August 2019, 3 months before her death, left the entirety of her estate, valued at approximately $320,000, to her nephew, Brian Ellis. Previously, her will had divided her assets equally among 4 cousins. Brian Ellis told detectives his aunt had called him in August to say she wanted to take care of him because he had been so supportive after her husband's death. He said he had not asked for the change and had been surprised by it. Investigators also discovered that in October 2019, Margaret had taken out a life insurance policy naming Brian as the sole beneficiary. The policy was for $50,000. The premiums were paid by Brian himself, according to bank records, though Brian told detectives he had simply helped his aunt set up the automatic payments as a favor. But there was more. A neighbor, Patricia Huang, 67, told detectives she had seen a man parked in a dark sedan outside Margaret's house on multiple evenings in October. She described the car as a late-model blue Honda Accord with a dent in the rear bumper. She had not paid much attention. It was not unusual for Margaret to have visitors. But she recalled one evening, approximately 2 weeks before Margaret's death, when she saw Margaret standing on the porch in what appeared to be an animated conversation with a man she did not recognize. Patricia could not describe the man's face clearly, but she remembered noticing he was tall, with short dark hair, and that Margaret had seemed upset. The man drove away quickly. When shown a photograph of Brian Ellis, Patricia said she could not confirm whether he was the man she had seen. She was certain only that someone had been visiting Margaret regularly in the weeks before her death. Brian Ellis denied any involvement in his aunt's death. He said he had not visited Hawick in October 2019 and had not seen Margaret since September, when they had lunch together in Worcester. He produced receipts, bank records, and cell phone GPS data to support his whereabouts. The data showed his phone had been in Worcester on the dates in question. There was no evidence he had traveled to Hawick. The investigation stalled. The medical examiner upheld the accidental death ruling. There was no forensic evidence linking anyone to Margaret's death. No witnesses to what had actually happened in the bedroom that morning. No proof that the notes were written by anyone other than Margaret herself. The block capitals could have been an attempt to disguise her handwriting, perhaps in a moment of shame or embarrassment. The second note, the one found in the cookbook, could have been written by Margaret as a cry for help that she never delivered. All of this was possible, but Detective Sarah O'Brien remained troubled. She kept the case file open, a practice she followed only when something nagged at her. In her experience, she told a reporter in 2021, the answers are usually in the details, and there were too many details that didn't fit. In 2022, the case was reviewed again. This time, forensic linguists were brought in to analyze the notes. The conclusion was significant. The linguistic patterns, the word choices, the sentence structures, the spacing between letters were inconsistent with Margaret Ellis's known writing. They were consistent, however, with a separate, unidentified writer. The linguists could not identify who that writer was. They could only say with reasonable certainty that the person who wrote both notes was not Margaret Ellis. No arrests have ever been made. The case remains open. Margaret Ellis is buried beside her husband Thomas in Hawick Cemetery, Plot 7C, under a modest headstone that bears only her name and dates. Her garden is overgrown now. The house on Birch Lane was sold in 2020 to a young couple from Boston who knew nothing of its history. They planted new flowers last spring. Brian Ellis still lives in Worcester. He declined to be interviewed for this documentary. And the notes remain in evidence, locked in a storage facility in Boston, 2 pieces of paper that tell 2 different stories, or perhaps no story at all. The truth of what happened to Margaret Ellis on the morning of November 14, 2019 may never be known. But somewhere, in a town where people still leave their doors unlocked, a question lingers. If Margaret Ellis did not write those notes, then who did? And if someone else was in that house that morning, someone who knew exactly what they were doing, then where are they now? The rain continues to fall on Hawick, as it did that Thursday, washing the streets clean, carrying everything away, leaving no trace of what was left behind.